We're on the top of Daf Haof Aleph Amar Aleph, and we were dealing with the sugya of Zeiri. Zeiri told us on Daf Haof Amar Beis, right by the wide lines, Nishbura mafrekes v'roiv basar iman avela. If the mafrekes of a bird is broken and roiv the basar, it's nevela means the animal is dead already, even though the simanim are both intact. So what the Gemara wanted to know was, how could you do malika and also sever the simanim? By the time you sever the simanim, the animal is dead already. Zakt Gemara mikol malkim kasha. How is it possible, according to Zeiri, to do a proper malika? Amarava ema v'chein hu oisa chaytech shedra umafrekes beloi roiv basar. You didn't necessarily have to puncture the roiv basar. With the kohen's nail, you go straight through the mafrekes. The roiv basar is still intact, and therefore, when he severs the siman by the oif, that would be killing the bird. Now, Rav Baruch Nussam asked a very interesting shaila. So obviously, the neck of the bird is thicker than the thumbnail of the kohen going in. So when you do cut roiv basar, if you do cut roiv basar, he has to go back and forth. But isn't there a whole shaila that we had yesterday, a machlokes, whether or not you could be moilech umevi by malika? But based on the fact that in order to cut roiv basar, you have to be moilech umevi. So unless you pull your thumb out and go stab it multiple times, I'm not sure how exactly it's done. We do know that malika is one of the most difficult avoiders to do. So maybe that's all part of it. Zok to Gemara, Kisalach Reb Zera. When Reb Zera went up to Yisrael, Ashkechei Rab Ami, he met Rab Ami. Yosy v'ka Amar la lahoshmaitza, meaning the shmaitza of Zeiri. He said over the halacha of Zeiri that if the mafrekes as well as roiv basar are cut, the animal is dead. Amar lei. So you asked the same shaila that we were discussing. So Reb Zera was quiet for a moment, pondering how to respond to Reb Ami's kasha. Then he answered, Ema kach hu oisa, chaytech shedru mafrekes beloi roiv basar. Exactly the same resolution that the Gemara came up with a moment ago. Tanya nami hachi. Ketzad moilkin chatas haof. How does one do malika on a chatas haof? So the halacha is chaytech shedra umafrekes beloi roiv basar acha megil levesh oilakana, and then he kil levesh oilakana chaytech simen echad. Because a chatas you only have to do malika on one. We learned yesterday that on the oil you have to do malika on both because you have to be mavdil because of havdalah. But as far as the taking the life of the bird, you chaydik simen echad ruboy, or roiv of the simen echad, v'roiv basar imay, and then you do the roiv basar. Uba oila, and if it's an oila, it's shnayim or roiv shnayim. Again, that's because of the havdalah that's required. Money. So we're going to learn at the bottom of the Amud. We're going to learn about a machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. The Rabbanon hold by the oila you have to not only sever the two simanim of the bird, but you have to sever them completely. Roiv is not enough. As part of the requirement of Havdalah, the two simanim have to be completely severed. But Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon said even to meet the threshold of Havdalah, it's enough to puncture or to sever roiv of the siman. The problem here is...
The head just hangs over.
I'm sorry?
It's just hanging. It's like it's hanging on a thread.
Well, it's probably not hanging on the siman. It's probably hanging on the meat that's in front of the skin that's in front of it. I don't know how much strength that has, but the question is, in order to be Mekayim Havdalah, would you have to completely sever the siman? The problem with this brisa is this brisa seems to be somewhat contradictory. Because let's have a look. That's exactly the machlokes, the Rabbanon and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. So who is this one Tana, who is this one Shita who's dancing by both chasnas? Mani irabanan ha'amri shnayim davka, and irabelazar b'shimon ha'amar roiv shnayim. So what is it? Zokt Rashi, plukta d'Rabelazar bar Shimon v'Rabbanan l'kamam b'shemaitin. We're soon going to see it. Ha'amar roiv shnayim davka v'lo yoser. He actually says it's better not to go more. Kidikatani l'kaman the beinan sheyei oiches b'roishu v'guf shehu mazeh. On Chav Beis, we're going to see that Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon doesn't say you can get away with cutting roiv. You must not go past the roiv, because there's a point where you have to hold the roish and the guf together when you're squeezing the dam out. So therefore, you don't want it to be considered severed. Zok to Gemara, Ema, this is how you can interpret the brayso. Shnayim l'Rabbanan, or roiv shnayim l'Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. That's exactly what the Tana was telling us. He's trying to cover all his bases. Whether you hold it to Rabbanan or whether you hold it to Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, you would sever that amount of the simon respectively.
They have the same machlokes by Chavis?
No, because this is a shayla in Havdalah. By Chavis, you only cut one simon. V'bayisema, but the Gemara is going to go through that, I believe, in detail shortly. V'bayisema, the reason why I say I believe is because I fell asleep while I was preparing last night. V'bayisema, ha v'ha, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. They're both going according to Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, and you only need roiv. Umay shnayim. So what does the Tana mean when he says shnayim or roiv shnayim? Shedoyim l'shnayim. So even though you only need roiv, but you can have a roiv that's 1 millimeter past the center, or you could cut 3/4, so it's obvious to the naked eye that it was roiv. Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon says l'chatchila it has to be a real roiv, that it's very obvious that it was roiv. B'di'eved, even if it's just a mashu past the roiv. Zokt Rashi. שדוימה לשניים דלכתחילה בעינן שיחתך רויב להדיה שיהי נר לעיניים שהוא בוי אוי רויב שניים ואפילו רויב שניים ואפילו רויב מצומצם. So that's what the Tana was saying. Either way would be good. L'chatchila it should be a noticeable roiv, but with the evid, if it's just a roiv, it would be acceptable. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. What would be if nishbira mafrekes? Rashi says now we're speaking about a human. So if someone's mafrekes broke, v'roiv basar ima, and roiv of the basar of the circumference of his neck got severed as well, mitama ba'oil. It's matama ba'oil. You know, roiv basar, I just touched it as roiv of the meat of the circumference of the neck.
That's what we say in the
But is that what the article says? What is the article about roiv basar? Does he roiv the? I thought I saw something about roiv the basar around the mafrekes. So I'm not sure if that means just the meat around that bone or if it's the meat of the whole circumference.
It contains, by the way of an oil, a little roof.
You have to go back probably to the first time it says it.
Roiv basar.
Whatever is that?
The Ziri, that was Mami Ziri, that was on Chaf and Beis.
It was on-
Chaf and Beis. I just want to make sure that we have our facts accurately of what roiv basar is.
Yeah,
Basar at the back of the neck. So
It's-
it doesn't
yeah.
go directly around the spinal cord. It means the whole meat of the mass.
There's no way you
Yeah,
can.
but
Yosy Moyle can maybe answer.
no. The art scroll says if a person's neck bone is broken together with most of the flesh upon it,
The mafrekes,
Right.
you would have cut roiv basar on the back of the neck.
why is that?
Because your
There's,
thumb is going to be at
I
least.
mean, if you're comparing the thickness of your thumb to the thickness of the,
It's a neck.
okay. So Zok to Gemara, V'rei basima metama boil. So such a person, Rahman al is a mace. He's considered not alive, and therefore he's metama boil. I vim timer oisa maisa de Eli was my frekers below V'rei basar. When Eli HaKohen died, he fell off the bench that he was sitting by when he heard about the terrible news that the urn was captured by the Plishtim. He was startled, he fell off, and he broke his mafrekas without the roiv basar, and he died. Vim timer oisa maisa de Eli, which was mafrekas below roiv basar, and he's still considered mace, as Rashi says. So Eli mafrekas below roiv basar hava v'kari le mace, because the pasuk says, "Vatishaver mafraktoi v'yamos."
Well, then of course
No, it's magic that was the cause of death. But according to Ziri, you won't die if your mafrekas breaks, only if, in addition to that, Roiv Basar was damaged. It should have said, Vatishavar mafraktoi v'Roiv Basar for Yamas. Right? So Dr. Moore, there's a very big difference. Zikna, shiny. He was a very old man. So that, a very old man who's hanging on by a thread, he could die with the mafrekas dying. And the pasuk says on Beferish of tomorrow. Tichsiv, v'hikes kiroi is aroino elakim, v'yipo el moyal akizei achiranis, he fell backwards, v'ad yad ashar, v'tishaver mafrakta v'yamois, kizakanish. So you see clearly, the pasuk had to explain how did he die merely by severing his spine. It must be he was a very old man, and that's why that was enough to kill him. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. What about karoi kedag? Rachman l'tzlan, you slice somebody open like a fish. Now, normally the way you slice open a fish is you slice its belly down the length to open it up to remove its guts. So the halach is mitama ba'oil. If someone did that to a human, that person would be mitama ba'oil. Rashi, afilu mafarchas. Even if he's still moving around, a body in that condition is not alive. But Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak, that's tafku migaboy. Not if you slit him down the stomach. If you slit him down the back, and you probably had to sever his rib cage to get into his
Cage in the front.
it's in the back too. Your rib wraps around.
All the way from the spine.
Yeah, and the spine is where they're connected to. So the Rishonim speak about what is the status of a person who was sliced open on the stomach, but because Shmuel Yitzchak is teaching Getavka if his back was sliced open. That's like the way you would fillet a fish. Shmuel also gistera. Amar Shmuel also gistera nevela. Shmuel said if you made someone into a gistera, if you made an animal into a gistera, it's a nevela. Nevela is something that's a word that's going to be used to describe an animal. What is a gistera? Rashi has two options. Either shechatcha l'rachba, that means you cut the animal, it's with the cross. Oy b'tzavara kuloi, so either you cut the neck off completely, that would be a gistera, split it in half. Oy b'shedra ad hachalal, or you sliced his spinal cord open, but you sliced it so deep that you've exposed the inner cavity of the abdomen of the animal. Zok Rashi called over hachalak l'shnayim kari gister. A gister is a Greek word, and anything that's split into two is called a gister. Amar Belazar, nitel hayerech. What if the yerech was pulled out? So it would be interesting to actually see the construction of the thigh of an animal. It might be in here. And usually, when an animal sits on its legs, you see a cow sitting down, you can't usually see where the leg bone connects to the body of the cow, and the reason for that is because he's sitting on that. Oh, that helps me a lot, because he's sitting. The animal is actually sitting on he sits on his hips, so therefore you cannot even see where the where that connection point is. Yeah, it could be, but I'll tell you one second. So he says, therefore he says that nicker. So much was taken out that even when the animal's sitting, you can actually see into the inside of the animal. That's when enough is removed that it's called a nevela. It's not just a treifa because it lost a leg, but it's considered dead already because so much is missing. Rashi is pretty clear with that. The yerech is minmakom chibure bevuka da'atma. The hip bone has like a socket, and the thigh bone has like a ball. The ball goes into the socket, and that's where the movement comes from. That's the joint. The chalal shala, kloimer loishen nita la'etzem im k'tzatz ha'basar ha'pnimi v'nishar basar ha'elyon v'ha'ar at chatzei yerech. It wasn't just that the bone was removed and the meat all around it is still there. Or shlishisoi, or a third of it, v'chayfa esamaka, and the meat would actually cover over the whole. The hazam treifa, that's merely a treifa, hu the havya, kidetan be'ema shenechtechu ragla, min harakuva l'mayla is a treifa. Dahainu ha'achroinim min harakuva u'lamayla. That's treifa. Aval kishenot al kol ha'bosar at sheniris gufa shel makom echtach ke'en chalal, that means a much larger section of the animal was removed, that even when it's sitting down, you can actually see the hole, which you would never normally see that area when an animal is sitting down. That's already an avela.
I wasn't really concentrating on what you were saying, but here's the full picture.
But it has all the, if it's only a skeleton, it's easier to see it.
Oh, it has a skeleton bones.
So can you see where the hip bone and the thigh bone connect? So if that bone comes out, usually the skin around it would cover over the hole.
Cool, it doesn't have the doesn't really talk about it.
No, it's there. It might not identify it there, but it's part of the animal. So Zok to Gemara,
It's a skeleton.
And as the erech, it shows it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, very nice. Where'd you get that?
And you haven't stick still.
so Zok to Gemara,
Put up here.
Amarava kol sheravutza v'niris chasera. If the animal's sitting down where normally that whole area would be concealed, and you could still see that a piece is missing, that's already an avela. Zok Rashi, derech habehema lirvoitz al yirecheha. When you see a cow sitting down, it actually sits right on its hips, and everything gets covered over because the body is covering over the hips. Umiskah says is yirecha berevit sasa. V'mniris chesroina, even keshi revutza, that means the animal is missing way too much, and it's a nevela, not a treifa. Tanan Hasan, hutzu rashayan. Pasha Pshat is his head got chopped off. Rashi says now we're referring to the shemoyne shrotzim kamari b'seder tyrus. So the head of a sheretz, let's take a lizard, his head got chopped off. Aval pisha mefarchasin, even though the animal is still moving around, Tameim, they're still tummy, they're considered dead. Kizonav halta shemefarcheses. If you chop off the tail of a lizard, it's going to move and swing around just like it was alive, but that's only nerves. It's not really life. It's not a sign of life. It can walk around even. Yeah. My hutzu. What is meant by hutzu? What is meant by hutzu? Rish Lakish Omar. Hutzu mamish. It literally means you chop the head off. So even though you chop the head off mamish, it's going to be tamei. Rav Ashi Omar, Rav Mani, Rav Ashi says in the name of Rav Mani, I think, Kehavdolas Olas Haof. It doesn't have to be completely severed and the head fell off. It just has to be the way a Olas Haof's head is separated. We know there's a machlokes about what that separation is. Does it mean that the simanim are both completely severed, which is the Rabbanon, or does it mean rive of them were severed? Gewaltig. Amar Shlakish, Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabasi, what do you mean when you say Kavdalas Olas Oif? Do you mean Kavdalas Olas Oif Rabbanon? And that means the simanim are totally severed, Veloy Pelgisu, and they're not arguing. Meaning, Hutzu Mamish, Rav Ashi Amar Rav Mani Kavdalos Olos Ha'oif, they're saying the same thing. Hutzu Mamish means that the simanim are completely severed, and therefore Rav Ashi Amar Rav Mani and Rish Lakish are not arguing. Dilma Kavdalos Olos Ha'oif Rav Shimon, which only 3/4 of the simanim were severed, and therefore Upalgisu, because Hutzu Mamish would not be described merely by Roiv de Simonim having been severed. Amarlei Kavdalas Oilas Oif LeRabbi Elazar Bar Shimon Ufalginon. So he said, no, it's actually machlokes if the Simonim have to be completely severed, or if it's enough that they should only be severed Roiv. Ikadamri, there was another way that this story was relayed. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omar Hutzu Mamish, Rabbi Asi Omar Rav Mani Kavdalas Oilas Ha'oif LeRabbi Elazar Bar Shimon B'Roiv Shnayim. So there it's much more explicitly stated. We weren't speculating what was being said. It's clear that that's what it meant. Zok Gemara.
Just a few words. Yeah, I'm canceling the request about the mattress. If you you want to know the reason,
We're in the middle of learning. Can we discuss it? Yeah, we'll discuss it later. Shkoich. Zok to Gemara. My Rabbanon, my Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. What is this? We've been talking about this machlokes, this highly anticipated machlokes between Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon and Rabbanon. What is this? Let's get down into understanding that machlokes itself. The Tanya we learned. It says when you bring a carbon of oifos by dalei dalas. So the ikr was a carbon chatos that one was supposed to bring, but due to his finances, he brought birds instead. Now it's very interesting because when you bring a carbon chatos, it's one animal, but when you bring birds, you bring echad lo'ila v'echad l'chatos. That in and of itself is a question. Why suddenly, just because you're bringing a less expensive carbon, you now have to bring an oila as well?
That's why.
What?
That's why.
What do you mean?
Because one goes to the chatas for your avera, and the other one's for the other.
But if it's replacing a chatos where you're only going to bring one animal as a chatos, why bring an oila? So the Mefarshim tell us that the reason for it is because in the chatas ha'oif there's absolutely nothing placed on the mizbeach. So you bring an oila with it. So the oila would be the part of the chatos that you owe to the mizbeach. So it says v'hasheni yasa oila kamishpat. So the question is, you should make it like the known halacha. What known halacha are we referring to? Zok the Gemara or Zok the Brisa kamishpat chatas behema, like a chatas behema. What is the mishpat chatas behema? Zogt Rashi, Kamishpat mashma shekotzav amishpat b'makom acher. V'aheichakoi, what other chatos are we referring to? A chatos behema to le'ilkoi, sharei oilazu ba chalipin law. As I mentioned, it's coming as a replacement for the behema of a chatos. Hilchach lo aksha will compare this oila to the chatos behema. V'yalef minei, we're going to learn halachas from it. The Gemara is going to outline shortly, the Brisa is going to outline shortly the specific halachas that we learn from chatas oif. Freit the Gemara or the Brisa ela kamishpat chatas oif, which seems to be more logical. Kamishpat compared to its partner, the chatas oif, rather than the chatas habehema. Zok Rashi ela kamishpat chatas oif. Shalai titain havdala b'mlikasa. Maybe that would be the lesson learned from chatas oif. By chatas oif, there's no avdol. There's one simon that gets cut. Maybe that's how the oilers oif should be treated as well, because it says by chatas mimolorpa v'lo yavdil. Zok Gemara, that wouldn't be logical to say, because kishu aimer v'krivoi, it uses the lashon of v'krivoi. It doesn't say v'hikriv es oila. It says v'krivoi tamiyat. The oila oif should be treated this way, but not something else. Therefore, with those words, with that word of v'krivoi, chilek hakasav ben chatos ha'oif le'oilas oif. Okay, so Rashi, kishomer v'krivoi be'oilas oif shel nedava. So v'krivoi is not in the parsha of oilas ha'oif that the parsha of oila v'yored is talking about. This v'krivoi is found in the parsha of oilas ha'oif of nedava. B'vayikra it says v'krivoi hakoyin al hamizbeach. It could have said v'hikriv hakoyin al hamizbeach, but it says v'krivoi hakoyin al hamizbeach u'malak es roishoi v'goymer. With the likes of hikriv el v'krivoi, clearly it's saying that there's something exclusive to oilas ha'oif that would not apply to chatas ha'oif. Mashma chaluka hakrivas ha'shalzeh me'akrovas ha'cherim. So what's the difference? Gil l'chakasev shaloi tilmad malikas oila mamikas chatos, and don't say that lo yavdil. Rather, by the oila you cut both simonim, unlike the chatos. So therefore, when it says kamishvat, it cannot be comparing the oilas ha'oif to the chatas ha'oif. It must be comparing the oilas ha'oif to the chatas behema. Ma chatas behema eina ba ela min achulin. Just like the chatas behema only comes from chulin, you can't take it with meiser money. And uvayoim, you could only bring the carbon by day. Uvayada hayamanis, and the avoiding is to be done with the right hand of the kohen. Af oilas ha'oif eine ba ela min achulin uviyom uviyode hayimanis. Beautiful. Correct Rashi, the obvious kasha. Chatas ha'oif has these three halachas. You can't bring a chatas ha'oif from Ma'aser money. You can't bring a chatas ha'oif by night. You can't bring any korban by night. And you have to do biyad hayimanis. So why can't we learn vosas as shlech to learn these halachas from chatas ha'oif? Zokt Rashi, uviyode hayimanis she'ein avodos of ksheirav elo b'yamin. We know all of what this must be done with the right hand. We just learned this. Prepare kama. We use the word etzba and kahuna in one pasuk. It means the right one. Why these halachas aren't exclusive to chatas behema? Look, the pasuk is talking about chatas oif, right then it goes to olas oif. Why dig back to a prior korban when it says kamishvat? Let's say it's referring to the korban immediately prior to the oila, which is the chatas oif, that has the same halachas. V'leilav lo milsa ma chatas oif min Chullin and beyoim and biryamin. The hakula nami isnu ba. The chatas oif has all those same halachas. We have the krivai to say that the oilas oif should be different from the chatas oif. What do you do with that? Limud v'chiluk the krivai lemil seyasa. Yeah, there are ways where the oil and the chatas are different, but there are also ways where they're similar. It's a very common thing. You have a meat, you have a riboy, so we apply one to one, one to the other. Kedamar chaluk oil mechatas linyan avdallah. So it's very simple. It's v'krivai legabe havdalah, cutting both simonim. That's exclusive to the oila. But legabe all the other halachos kamishpat. It's just like the chatas oif. Zokt Rashi lav pirchi. That's not a good question. The chatas oif like siva bechulin behedja. How do we know even that the chatas oif has to be brought from chulin? You know how you know it? You only know it from chatas habehema. So the real source of this information is chatas behema. Ela behema. Ksiv kidlakaman uvehekish yalfa. You only know chatas ha'oif has these same halachas from a hekish of chatas behema midi ikri chatas. Since they're both called a chatas, using a hekish, we say that just like we know by chatas behema it has to be min Chullin, so too the chatas ha'oif has to be min Chullin. And we know there's a rule: v'davar alamed behekish einei chayzer v'alamed behekish bekochim. If the source of your information is a hekish, you cannot now export that same information using a hekish. The kaimalom chalator lamedin lamed milamed chutz mikachim. So that's why we are learning certain halachas directly from chatas behema, and we're making a distinction that the oilas oif and the chatas oif are different in the way the malik is done. The oilas oif you moilek both simonim, the chatas oif one simon. See, the Gemara doesn't need a special word. The Gemara always knows that in Yiddishkeit, we always cut out the middleman. Why would I go to your information? I'll go straight to the Chatas Oif. Zog the Gemara weiter. Fragt the Gemara, Ima lahalon. So maybe we should ask, if you're comparing it to Chatas Behema, ma lahalon b'roiv shnayim. By a Chatas Behema, you have to shecht not kol shnayim, only roiv shnayim. So maybe Afkan b'roiv shnayim, maybe by the other side, you should only do malik on the roiv shnayim, not sever them completely. Obviously, this is the Rabbanan who holds that you have to cut the simonim completely. According to the Rabbanan Shimon, it's taka roiv. That we'll get to soon. But according to the Rabbanan, where by the oilets oif you have to totally sever the simonim, maybe you should learn from the chatos that you don't totally sever the simonim. Talmud loimer umalak v'hiktir. What does it say in the pasuk? It's important that we look at the pasuk inside. It says v'krivi akayin ela mizbeach. Okay, it brings it to the mizbeach. Umalak es roishai, and then v'hiktir hamizbecha v'nim tidom al kir mizbeach. And then the next pasuk, which isn't quoted here, it says again v'hiktir ela mizbeach. So zokt Rashi, why are there two mentions of akrava? It also says something very interesting. And then normally, when you burnt the animal on the mizbech already, how could you make mitzvah dam after that? Mitzvah dam has to be done before it's put on the mizbech. So these are the inconsistencies in the pasuk. So Zok Toises, Zok Rashi, Talmud Lomar Olas Tadava Umalak as Roishai V'Hikter HaMizbecha V'Nim Sadamai V'Chiyav Shaloimer Kain. How could you make Zrika after the Hakrava? V'Yachashu Makdir Humoitza. Elo, what it must mean, Ela Molkoi Keder Hakterosai. So in the first instance where it says V'Molak is Rosh V'Hikter, it doesn't mean you should actually make the Haktorah. It means make the Malika in such a fashion that it will facilitate the Haktorah where they have to be separated. Ma Haktorah HaRosh B'Atzmai V'Avguf B'Atzmai. Because there's two psukim in the parsha of Olas Oif that say V'Hikter. Why does the Torah need to be redundant? It's obviously because there's a special Haktorah for the head and a separate Haktorah for the body. They need to be separated when you put them on the Mizbeach. Kach shnui b'teres kahanim, v'asim mefarish, minayin l'Haktorah shaharosh ba'atzmai, v'aguf la'atzmai by the oila. How do you think they're totally separated? Kishuaymer la'achar Haktorah zu. After this Haktorah in this pasuk that we just read, the next pasuk says, v'shisa oisa b'chnovav, and then v'hiktir oisai. How could you be makter the animal if you were makter it last pasuk? It must be that there's two haktaras that we're talking about. Hare haktaras aguf amura. That's the separate reference to haktaras aguf. Hamani mikay haktar rishayna b'haktaras harosh. Alma beis haktar saying there's two separate haktaras by the Olas Oif, the head separately and the body separately. V'ashesua mavdil b'neim. When you tear them apart, that's where you separate them. So therefore, meaning it has to be completely severed. It can't just be roiv. That is how the Rabbanan learned the psukim, that the head has to be totally severed from the body, meaning both simonim are fully cut. Let's have a quick look at Rashi. Af malikas ha'oif harosh ba'atzmai v'hainu shnayim. That means both simonim have to be completely severed. Va'afilu mechuber ba'ar, even though the skin is still connected, as we addressed earlier, havdalah chashivi, that still qualifies and passes the threshold of havdalah. Kedamar like we just said yesterday, the b'malika kasav rachmana hachavdalah, and we know malikas cheshchita, so we say v'chol sheyeshe b'shchita, any part of the neck that's involved in the process of shchita. Therefore, yesh to b'avdallah. V'or shein shchita niskeres by it has nothing to do with this. B'avdallah nami lo ma'akiv. Ulekaman parach. Soon the Gemara is going to ask. Kivin enough kalei havdallah ba'oila mehacha. From these pasuk, these psukim of Umalak Victor, where we know you have to totally cut both simonim during the malika. So then lamali v'krivoi l'chalek ben chatas la'oila. Why do I need the hikrivoy? We said a moment ago, hikrivoy says that this is different than the chatas. Ha'hacha behedjik siv the yavdil. V'hacha behedjik siv the lo yavdil. But the chatas it says beferish. She says lo yavdil. It says malakas roish lo yavdil. So by the chatas the Torah tells you beferish not to be mavdil. Here it says beferish you are mavdil. So that's all I need. The hikrivoy, if I didn't know, the hikrivoy will say even though chatas is this way, oil should be different. And then we have to speculate on what way it's different. But if the Torah beferish says by chatos lo yavdil and beferish by oilo yavdil, so what do I need vikrivoi to highlight that distinction? So that the Gemara is going to discuss later. So now we have the shita of the Rabbanan. Now we need to clarify. We have another opinion in the shita of the Rabbanan. Rabbi Shmuel Omer kamishbat. Right? It says you should make the oilo kamishbat chatas ha'oif. Ma chatas ha'oif mimul oirif. Just like the chatas ha'oif. Where do you make the malika? From the mul oirif of oilas ha'oif mimul oirif. So he learns not like the earlier shita that Kamishvat is comparing it to chatas behema. He's learning you're comparing it to chatas ha'oif. Zot Gemara imal alon moilek ve'enim mavdil b'simen echad. Afkan by the oila, maybe you should say moilek ve'enim mavdil b'simen echad. Talmud loymar v'hikrivoi. That's what the v'hikrivoi tells you. This is different. The oil is different than the chatos. By the chatos, it's only one siman, but by the oil, it's two siman. Azok Rashi, Rabbi Shmuel Omer Kamishvat Chatas Oif, the Salak Minei that we just finished talking about. That's what we're comparing the oil oif to. Ulahachi iskish. That's why we have the hekesh. Mishum bechatas ksev mimul arpoi. Where is the malika done? From the back. It's the only place where we know where the malika is done from. So how do you know the malika is not from the front of the neck? How do you know you start from the back of the neck? That's only revealed to us by the Chatas Haof. Vein Malika Ksiv Be'oila, Ela B'Shel Nadava, and therefore Vizu L'Meida Mizu. We know the Malika of the Olas Nadava, we learned that from the Malika of the Chatas, which means it's from the back, and once we know that the Olas Nadava is done that way, we apply that to the Olas Choiva of the Oila V'Yored as well. The Kaman Parach Tanakama, how do you know this? The Hach Svara, the Minachulin, Uveyoim, Uveyada Yamanis, these are important halachas that the Rabbanan learned from the comparison to Chatas Behema. But now that he's saying that we're learning something else from Chatas Ha'oif, so how are we going to know these three important halachas? Naf Kaleli Rabbi Shmuel, Ba'olas Choiva, Behekesha. We know that there's a hekesh that combines all of the korbanos. We've referenced it many times. It says, "V'zois haTorah la'olah v'lamincha l'chatos the ishkus kulu la'adadi." All korbanos are compared to each other, and therefore there's what to learn from each one to the others. V'yafi kulei mechatos. Therefore, all of the oifos that require malika, we could learn from the chatos oif. They're the malikas from the back. V'achi gamri lei b'shili atoida. We actually learned this at Rashi in Menachos, right? We all remember that. U'mishtama lei bein olas behema bein olas ha'oif. The Tanakama loy mashmalei. The Tanakama holds you can't learn from this hekesh, this halacha, miyakesha, ela karbonis behema, dimish t'shlam v'ashim, but you won't be able to use this hekesh to teach you halachas about oifais.
So this hekesh that Rashi's talking about is more the general halachas, right? That it has to be biyamin.
Well, those are the three halachas that the Rabbanan learn that are imported from Chatas Behema to Olas Haof.
And I think that's what Rashi tried to say, is that once you have the pasuk of the Lisa Teres, the oil of Michal.
No, Rashi, Rabbi Shmuel holds that you can use that pasuk to teach us all that information. But the Rabbanan held no, you needed to have a specific hekesh to Chatas Behema to know that information, because the big generalization only applies to animals, not birds. So therefore you couldn't use that. Okay, so now we've got the shita of the Rabbanan and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. Omer kamishbot chatas oif ma lahalon. Just like by the chatas oif, oiches beroishu v'guf umaze. You hold together the roish and the guf when you make the mitzvah, meaning they're not separated. So Rashi, oiches beroishu v'guf umaze la'acha malika havazah. The azah is after the malika. K'dichsev b'chatas oif kabishmi eskoel. V'hiza midama chatas. Afkan oiches beroish uveguf umase. So let's stop here because we're running against the clock. And anyway, we did the daf. Tonight we're going to start from the shita of Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, who learns. We're doing one tonight, and tomorrow, an hour before mincha, before the first mincha, I'm going to repeat the tomorrow's daf. We'll learn tonight and tomorrow. Some people might come tonight, some people might come tomorrow. I plan to come to both. Maybe I'll know it. Maybe I'll know it eventually. Okay, everybody should have a wonderful day.